Hi everyone, it's Monica. Welcome back to my TOEFL Speaking Series. Let's look at question 3 today. Same as before, I will first introduce the question, provide steps for answering that question, and then provide a simple answer followed by tips on how to master your response. The format for question 3 is the same as that of question 2. So you have to read a short passage in 45 seconds, then listen to a 1 to 2 minute track, then provide a 60-second response with only 30 seconds of preparation time. The difference between question 3 and question 2 is that the content for question 3 is academic. So for the reading, you read about an academic concept or term or phenomenon, and for the listening, you listen to a lecture in which a professor provides 1 or 2 examples to demonstrate the academic concept that was mentioned in the reading. So I like to call question 3 the academic concept definition plus examples question. Here's what your notes should look like. From the reading passage, first write down what the academic term or concept is. It's usually found in the heading of the reading passage that you read. Second, go through the reading and find the definition, the meaning of the academic term or concept, and write some keywords down to help you later on to rephrase the meaning of this term. Steps 3 and 4 are both from the listening, depending on how many examples the professor provides in the lecture. If there's 1 example, take notes on that example. If there are 2 examples, take notes on both examples. Let's try question 3 together. Here is a sample reading passage for question 3. You can read along with me and see how I would take notes, or you can hit pause and give yourself 45 seconds to read this passage and take notes on your own. Acrostics. When it comes to recalling information, people often use memory tools known as mnemonic devices to help them remember things more easily. One common mnemonic device is the use of acrostics. An acrostic takes the first letter of each item you want to remember in sequence and use those letters in the same order to make a memorable sentence or phrase. This new sentence or phrase is meant to help people recall pieces of information in their original order, since the first letter of each word in the sentence represents the first letter of each word in the original sequence of information to be remembered. After the reading passage disappears from the screen, you will listen to a lecture explaining this concept. As you listen, remember to take notes on the example that's given. Now let's listen to a lecture from a psychology class. Here's a good example of this. Remembering the order of the planets in our solar system has always been a challenge for young students. So one of the ways to make it easier for students to remember the planets in their correct order is by using the mnemonic device acrostics. One of the most popular sentences used is, "My very excellent mother just served us nachos." The first letter of each of the word in the sentence represents the first letter of each of the planets in order. So, the M in my stands for the M in Mercury. The V in very stands for the V in Venus. The E in excellent represents the E in Earth, and the M in mother represents the M for Mars, and so on and so forth. So, when someone wants to remember the order of the planets in the correct order, he or she just simply recites the sentence, "My very excellent mother just served us nachos," to recall the planets Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune in order. Your listening notes should have looked something like this. In the listening, the professor takes trying to remember the order of the planets in our solar system as an example. The sentence that's formed by taking the first letter of each of the planets in order is this sentence. "My very excellent mother just served us nachos." The professor explains that the first letter of each word in this sentence represents the planet in the correct order. So for example, the M in my represents Mercury. The V in very represents Venus. The E in excellent represents Earth. After the listening ends, the question will appear on the screen. Using the professor's example, explain how acrostics is used to recall information in sequence. Using your notes, your response should include the following. First, explain the meaning of the academic term that was introduced in the reading passage. 2. Transition to the listening. 3. Summarize the professor's examples. Make sure you show how the example that was given actually illustrates the concept. Here is an example answer. According to the passage, Acrostics is a memory device that helps people recall information in order by taking the first letter of each item in a sequence and making a new sentence. In the lecture, the professor takes the order of the planets as an example. For example, my very excellent mother just served us nachos is a sentence that helps students remember the planets in the solar system in order. Since it's a sentence that comes from taking the first letter of each planet in order to form a new sentence that's memorable. So the M in my stands for the M in the first planet, Mercury. And the V in very stands for the V in Venus, which is the second planet. This is known as the Acrostics mnemonic device. As you can see from the sample question and answer, question 3 contains much harder content than question 2. Here are some tips to remember. First, define the academic term. The reading passage explains an academic concept in detail. So ideally, you should be able to read, understand, write down some notes to help you rephrase what the meaning of the term is in just 45 seconds. However, this can be difficult to do in the limited amount of time that you are given. So you should be able to at least find the definition sentence and write down enough keywords that you can paraphrase or rephrase what the meaning of the academic concept is in your own response. 2. Learn to control your time. You should start your answer by providing a simple definition of what the academic concept or term or phenomenon is, but you shouldn't spend more than 15 to 20 seconds doing so. In other words, you don't need to go into too much detail in terms of summarizing the reading passage. Instead, you should save the majority of your time, at least 40 seconds, on explaining the example. The paraphrasing and the summary of the examples that are given from the listening passage should take you at least 40 seconds to do. Sometimes the professor gives one example to demonstrate. Sometimes the professor provides 2 examples to illustrate whatever the concept is from the listening. If only one example is given, usually there are more details that you need to cover in your summary. When there are 2 examples that are given, then usually there are a little less information for each example that you need to be able to paraphrase and summarize. So either way, you need to watch your time and decide how much time to spend on the first one and how much time to spend on the second one. To divide them equally would be at about 20 seconds summarizing each of the 2 examples that are given. Of course, if there's only one example, then just make sure you explain the key points in that one example. Always focus on how does the example actually demonstrate the concept that was given from the reading passage. 3. Be specific. When it comes to summarizing the lecture part of the listening, make sure you include the specific name of the example that's given, regardless if it's an exotic plant or an animal or the name of a planet or a business strategy or a hypothesis. Be thorough in your explanation. Don't skip any steps or key concepts. Whether your summary of the example can clearly demonstrate the concept that's given in the reading passage will determine your score. 4. Finally, remember to follow my steps for taking notes for this question and the steps for responding. Now, this is a tougher question compared to question 1 and question 2, especially if we encounter difficult vocabulary or concepts that we are less familiar with. So for this question, you really need to do enough practice before you take the actual exam. Alright, that's it for question 3. Remember to come back next week for our last but not least, question 4. And if you like my videos, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Turn on your notification bell, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!